All right, guys. How you doing today? Doing all right. Good. Can I answer any questions for you before we get started? Okay. Well, when we left off, we had started working on this to-dos example. Had gotten a little bite taken out of it. There were a couple of snags that I'd run into, mostly because of brain malfunction, I think. The two things that I could remember I had trouble with was getting the turn gem to work. When I looked at it again later, it turned out that the problem I was having, it turned out later. Oh, yeah, bad joke. It turns out the reason that I was having trouble with it was simply that my gem was out of date. I had used the turn gem sometime in the past, installed an older version of it, and then when I tried to use it last week, it was recognizing that I already had it installed, so it wasn't using the latest version, and that's what was actually causing the error. So all I did was say gem update turn. It installed the newest, latest, greatest version of it, and now turn's working just fine. If I jump over to my console and I run the rake command to execute my tests, I get the output from turn instead of the default testing style. So right now it looks like we're passing all of our tests. I've got a couple of unit tests in there, 3 functional tests. Everything shows as passing right now. Okay. The other problem I had last week, and this is the really boneheaded one, was that I couldn't get my root route to work. Right? It is working now. You see my URL up there, no URL given, and it takes me immediately to the index page of my to-dos, which is what I had set my root route for. Why wasn't it working last week? I forgot to delete the index.html page out of the public folder. If the index.html page, or any other static page for that matter, is in the public folder, and you put in a URL to it, Rails will always serve up that static page in preference to anything else. It won't even check your routes. It doesn't matter. Right? So as soon as I deleted that index.html file, then all of a sudden it didn't have any choice but to go and look at my routes, discover my root route, and route me to where it was that I wanted to go. So that was a stupid mistake. I think I do that about once a year. I fight with that, and it always snaps it back into place, the importance of always getting rid of that index file immediately upon setting a root route so that you don't forget about it. Right? Okay, so we were kind of going through this to-do example mostly just kind of as an excuse to try out some new things, try out some things we hadn't played with before, and to do some test-driven development to kind of work our way through some tests. As I showed you a second ago, all the tests we have right now are passing. What we actually have in the browser here then is an application that lets us create new to-do items. So I can put in teach Rails class as a to-do item. I can set a due date for it whenever it is that I happen to want it to be due. Hit create to do, and it gets added to the list right there. So already the application we've started is structured slightly differently than things we've done in the past. Instead of having the traditional new page, for example, we just put the form for creating new to-do items just directly here on the home page. Right? Next thing I was kind of thinking about probably doing was getting rid of the edit page. I went back and it looked, and it looks like we had intended at some point to put in an edit page. Right? There's an edit page that I have that's generated. It's just sort of the default auto-generated edit page. So I guess I must have created that when I created my controller. Right? And I have a test to see if I can access it. But I'm thinking I don't really want that edit page at all. The only thing I can think that I might want to edit in a to-do would be maybe the name of it itself. And that hardly seems worth it. I could keep things a whole lot simpler if I just didn't allow that to be edited. Basically, if you just delete it instead and recreate it. Seems like that would be just as effective. Right? Everything else about a to-do that I think I might want to change, like whether it's marked as complete, whether it's marked as urgent or not, I was thinking we might try and do that just with simple hyperlinks instead of having a full-blown form that has to be manipulated, has to be worked with, has to be maintained in order to do those sorts of things. So let's go ahead and get rid of that edit page. I'm just going to blow away the actual file itself. There it goes. In my to-dos controller, I'm going to get rid of the edit action, which was empty anyway. And in my tests, I'm going to get rid of the test that's checking to see if I can get to the edit page. With those changes made, if I rerun my tests, looks like everything still passes. I just have one less functional test than I had a minute ago. All right. Next thing I thought we might work on then is finding a way to mark to-do items off of our list. That's a pretty important thing to be able to do with to-do items, right? You got to be able to mark them off. Right? Over on my index page, where I'm listing out each one of my to-dos, what I think I want to do is next to the to-do, I want to put in a hyperlink that's maybe just an X. So it shows up kind of like that, just an X next to each one. And then what I'd like to be able to do is just click the X and have that be the trigger that says remove this to-do item. Okay. Now that's a little bit different than anything we've done before. Okay. We've certainly done edit and update previously. Right? But whenever we've done that in the past, we've always done it from a form, kind of the traditional way of doing it. Doing an update from a hyperlink would be a little bit different. Yes, sir.
Once I went through and deleted the edits, then the testing and the controller, I went and did the root thing like you did, and I'm getting the should get index error.
So you got rid of everything having to do with edit, and you set a root route, and you deleted the index.html file, but you're getting a routing error?
Should get index undefined method to use path.
It's not ringing a bell. Let me peek real quick.
Just got to use path.
Yeah.
Get to that error though.
Do rate routes.
Switch it to do.
No, I think the problem is in the routes. Resources on it. Should be resources continues. That should be so try that. And then we routes again. Now you've got to do this there. This is the first thing. Okay. You got it. All the pluralization. Okay. All right, so basically, want to be able to click the hyperlink and have it mark these to-dos, mark the to-do, the associated to-do as being complete, right? How would we actually accomplish that? A couple different aspects to it, I suppose. One is that for the actual hyperlink itself, I need something, some path, some URL that I can link to that hopefully will eventually end up accomplishing marking a to-do as being complete. Right? In the to-dos controller then, there would have to be some action that actually gets called that ends up marking the to-do as being complete. So if I can create that action in the controller and then link to it from the hyperlink, should be good. Right? So what do I put into the controller to link to? Well, I could create a special action in the controller called mark complete. I could create a route to it so I could then link to it from my hyperlink, and that action could basically just take the ID of a to-do and mark it as complete and save it. Right? But really, is that necessary? If I did go that route, I would have to basically duplicate that work again when I wanted to, say, have something I could click on to mark it as being urgent. I'd have to have a mark urgent action added to my controller. Right? I think what we could do instead is we could instead just stick with a more standard update action in our controller, the same type that the edit page usually submits to. Right? That way it could potentially be used to update any aspect of a to-do. Even if we did decide to go back and put in a full-blown edit page, we'd be able to use that same update action. Right? The update action has that advantage in that it would be flexible and we could use it potentially to update anything. It also has the advantage that it's just a standard RESTful action. So we actually already have a route to it. We wouldn't have to put in any strange or unorthodox routes. Right? So let's see. Normally the update action in the controller would retrieve a to-do, right, based on some ID it had been passed. So something along the lines of to-do.find params ID. Then we would try to update its attributes. And we would give it parameters for to-do that had been submitted. And then if that update succeeded, in our case, we would want to redirect to the index action, which is the to-dos URL. And I could send along a notice that says to-do was updated. If it failed for some reason, then I would probably just want to stay right there on the index page. So, kind of that basic idea. It's kind of the way a standard update method would look. Probably should have written a test for that first. But let's go ahead and give a test a try now. Let me write a test called can update to-do completed. And I suppose what the basic idea would be is that we would need to retrieve one of our to-dos. What if I said to-do equals to-dos 1? So I've got a to-do there and a variable I can work with easily. Then I suppose what I would want to do is check to see, well, I suppose what I'd want to do is try to execute that action in the controller. Right? Well, what if I did get update that would need to be passed the to-do itself for the ID. Right? So we'd say ID to-do.id, and I would also need to pass it the to-do except with the correct updated value. So I could say completed, true. And then after executing that hit against the update action in my controller, I could assert equal that we get back true when we look at to-do's completed value. If I run my test, that should fail a million different ways. Yes, indeed. Got an error in there. Right. Can't mass assign protected attributes completed. Did I call the attribute completed? Did I even give the to-dos an attribute called completed? I don't remember. If I go take a look at my to-do model, oh, I gave it an attribute just called complete. So let me use that instead. Complete. Everywhere it was mentioned as completed. I wish I'd called it completed. That makes more sense. Let me try my tests again. Alright, no errors, but a failure this time. True as expected, but was false. So none of the code is blowing up necessarily, but we are not getting the result that we expected. I was expecting to get back true, but false is what I get back when I check to see if that to-do is complete. It seems to be true that I'm passing. Right? Oh, here's an idea. I'm doing this as a GET request. Can I do that as a GET request? If I take a look at my routes, in order to get to update, it has to be a PUT request. If I try and do that same URL as a GET request, what we're actually doing is going to the show page. If we go to the show page, there's no reason to imagine that all of a sudden magically we would have it become completed, right? So instead of GET right there, let me try changing that to PUT. Let's see what that does when I run my tests. Still have a failure. True as expected but was false. What else could be wrong? The other thing that update action was supposed to do was that if it was successful, it was supposed to redirect us to the to-dos URL. What if we added an assertion for that? What if we say assert redirected to to-dos path? Try my tests again. It says that was true. We seem to have gotten past that particular test. If I comment out that assert equal and just check for the assert redirected to, yeah, it likes that okay.
I'm using an undefined method stringify keys here.
Undefined method stringify keys. Something in my memory is making me think it has something to do with the ID that's being passed. But off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly what it is.
Is it ID is stored as a string in oriented?
Could be. The actual format of the ID, whether it's like a string or a symbol.
Or like an integer, it's supposed to be a string or
Yeah. I don't know, it might be. your update action in your controller? Everything look right there?
To do instead of writing sub to do.
Where was it?
On the second line after I think of the if, I had ID instead of to do.
Okay.
Okay, was it?
Ah, good. All right, now figure out what's wrong with mine. So why isn't it updating? I don't know. What if I try this? Update attributes, and I'm just going to say complete true. Taking out the params altogether, so it doesn't matter what I pass. Anytime I call update, it should always set complete to true. See if that makes the test pass. It did not. Something else funny going on. Are we working with the right to-do, I wonder? Instead of using the to-do from the fixtures, what if I just make a new to-do? To-do dot create. And every to-do had a description that was required, right? Let me try that, see if that makes any difference. No, doesn't look like it. Well, it is a little bit different though. Now I'm getting true expected but was nil. So previously the complete value was false when I was using the fixture data, but now on this new to-do the default value for complete is nil instead, but it's still not getting it set to true. Something makes me think there's something wrong with the way I'm passing my parameters. When I call the update action, it's going to have the ID, and it's going to have the to-do data. I'm providing both of those pieces of information because those are the two things that have to be taken out of the parameters, the ID and the to-do data. But nevertheless, something's still going weird, isn't it? Trying to think of the way that the default update test usually looks. Maybe I should look at another one for a clue. Let me grab a copy of one of our old examples.
This has something to do with the assert equal true. Here's what the error says. True is expected but was nil assertion at test function.
Right.
Test line 24.
Are you getting an error or a failure? Oh, that's correct then. Right. It's not that we wrote the assertion wrong. It's basically telling us the assertion isn't true. The assertion failed. So we told it to expect the value of true, but it's instead getting a value of nil. So nothing wrong with the calling the method itself. It's just the fact that we're not getting what we actually expected. I grabbed our music example. That had tests in it, didn't it? Let's see. Functional tests in our music example. Tests for the album. For update. The put request here. That looks a lot like what I'm doing, doesn't it? Put going to update, passing an ID, comma separated, passing the actual active record object with a hash that has the data in it. The only difference is I didn't actually have, excuse me, didn't actually have the ID listed there. It was figuring it out on its own, but same basic idea. Yep, same thing. I can't for the life of me find anything wrong with the test itself. What could be wrong with the controller action? We find a to-do based on an ID. We update the attribute at the moment very specifically. That should auto-save, so complete should end up being true. And we redirect. If I go back to the original way I wanted to get that done, not sure where it's going bad. Maybe we should try actually implementing it and see if maybe that doesn't jar something, knock something loose. Let's give it a try. All right. Over here in the index action, my little X, I want it to link to that update action, which means I would need to use which route? It would basically be the same as the show route, except it would be a put request instead of a get request. Right? So just to-do path. So if I do to-do path, and give it the to-do that we're making the hyperlink for. I would also in there then need to pass the value that I want to have updated. So to-do complete true. And I would need to make it a put request. Just out of curiosity at the moment. That renders okay, it's not causing any errors. To make it a put request, on the hyperlink itself, I'll set method to put. Nothing too strange. Let me see the actual hyperlink that was generated. Looks like it's going to the right URL. Ooh, the data that's being passed though is very wonky. Data method equals put. That part looks right. This piece here does not look correct though. Wasn't sure how it was planning on encoding that, but boy, it sure looks weird. What other way is there to write that? Not sure. Maybe we need some Google. Let's do Rails hyperlink update. Link to update without form. Update a single attribute with link. All sounds like possibilities, and it looks like I've been to all these places before. What do you think of that? That's... I'm getting tired of saying this, but boy, that's pretty much what I'm doing, isn't it? Right? We're doing to-do path, passing the to-do item, then passing a hash called to-do that has the updated value in it. Method put is a separate argument to link to. Curious. Well, that hyperlink sure looks weird. I wonder if it'll work. I haven't actually even really tried it yet, have I? I guess that data has to go somewhere. Let's see what happens. Back on my index page, for the moment, next to each to-do item, let me display whether they are complete or not, just so we can tell if it works. Nothing's showing up next to any of them right now, probably because the complete value is nil. If I click the hyperlink next to one of them, oh, look at that. True showed up next to it. If I click the hyperlink next to buy milk, true. It actually looks like it is working. Interesting. Very interesting. So we got the feature to actually work, it looks like, but not the test. What if I said assert to-do.complete equals true? Wrong thing. That failed. Good. Should have. Keep coming back to the idea that the to-do we're trying to work with is different or somehow causing the problem.
What did the original one look like?
The original
to-do equals. Was it to-do equals to-do.find brand ID?
No, I just did to-dos 1 was what I had in there originally. I was thinking about just changing it to a... are you talking about in the test?
Yeah, right there.
Yeah, that's what I had originally. And then I changed it to what I had a second ago, and it made no difference, other than the fact that the complete attribute had a different value, false instead of nil. What if I did to-do.find, how about to-do.first? Same thing. Should be the same thing. Are we actually hitting the update action? How could we not be? If we weren't hitting the update action, I can't believe we wouldn't be getting some other error about this line. That's got to be going to the update action. And if we are going to the update action, how can it not be updating the attribute? Have I simply misspelled something somewhere? I don't know. Maybe we should just skip it. There. Got a skip in there now. What's all this about? Skipped, no message given. You have to give a message with skip? Okay, well, there you go. You can give a message with skip. Look at it again later. Maybe whatever's wrong with it will come back to me later and we'll be able to figure out what's wrong with it. It's only so interesting sitting and watching me wrestle with these problems, I imagine. All right, let's move on and we'll come back to that when I figure out what's going on there. If I figure out what's going on there. No, when I figure out what's going on there. Very optimistic, okay? For the actual to-dos themselves, what if we split them into separate lists? One list for to-dos that are not complete and another list for to-dos that are complete. All right? So in our index action, when we get our index page, we of course want to see that there's a successful response. Right now what we're doing is we're assigning a variable called to-dos, an instance variable called to-dos, which has all the to-dos in it. What if we instead had a list of completed to-dos and a list of pending to-dos? If I run that test, that should fail, of course, because we're not creating those two instance variables. Yeah. One failure in there. Nil expected not to be nil. Certainly. Okay. Over in the actual controller itself, what if we replace this todos.all with a pending todos, where we say to-do.where complete is false? Actually, I guess complete would be nil is the way it's set up. We have the default value just being nil. And then we could have complete to-dos. Or did I call it completed again? Completed, I called it there. And I could say that's for to-dos where complete is true. Rerun my tests. Have an error. Undefined method size for nil. Oh, that's probably coming from the actual index template itself, right? Since I changed the instance variables that are available to it, but I never actually updated the index page itself. Yeah, sure enough, the index page is still looking for something called to-dos, and that no longer exists. It's now pending to-dos. Up here, pending to-dos. Run the test again. There we go. Still have my skip in there, but no failures, no errors. So that seems to have fixed that up. Alright. Now how about in addition to the table that I already have here, let me create an additional table. I'll put it down below my new form. And for this one I want to display my completed to-dos. I don't suppose I changed too much, but running my tests again, everything still looks good. Over in the actual browser itself, that's what I've got now. So a list above and a list below. If I click the X on something in the list above, the pending to-dos, it should basically jump to the list below. Yep, that's exactly what it seemed to do. Good. Let me just neaten up that page a little bit, make it a bit easier to follow. Let's see. I'm going to put in an H3 pending to-dos. Down above my bottom table, I'll put in an H3 completed to-dos. Just a little bit of formatting. My list below in that table, I'm going to give it a CSS class of completed. Let me get rid of where I'm showing the trues or falses. That was just temporary while we were debugging. And maybe just a quick little bit of CSS under assets, style sheets, to-dos, .css.scss. I want to say in the table that has the class of completed, if I have a TD, then what I want to do is change the text decoration, isn't it? I want to do a strike through, do a line through it like it was marked off the list. Text decoration, is it strike through? What's the CSS property? Remember off the top of your head? Back to Google. It is a text decoration. Line through. Is that what it's called? Give that a try. There. Now things on my completed list are marked off like they're completed. Mark the last one off. Tells me I'm all done with everything. What about being able to mark things not done? What if I put something on my completed list accidentally? And I want to be able to move it back? Maybe the hyperlink down there should be to mark it off the completed list, which would put it back on the pending list again. That ought to be pretty easy to do from where we are right now. On the index page, we passed complete true when we wanted to add them to the complete list. If we wanted to be able to move them back, then we should just be able to say complete nil. Yeah, there we go. Now I can very quickly and easily be able to move things back and forth between being complete or not being complete. Just need tests to go along with it. Just got to get better at testing to be able to do that, I suppose. What do you think? That's a little bit different than the way we've done it in the past. It can be kind of nice, though. You know, one thing we never did with the actual to-dos was display their due date. Again, on my index page, for pending to-dos, maybe I want to actually show their due date. What do we call that? Just due date? Well, there it is, but boy, that's ugly. That's not going to mean much to anybody, is it? Instead of showing the actual date and time, what if we just showed a description of when it was due, like 3 days from now, or something like that? Rails has a method, a text helper. What's it called? Distance to time in words? Something like that? Rails distance of time in words. So instead of showing the actual date itself, what if I called distance of time in words and I passed it that due date? Well, that didn't work at all. Time cannot be coerced into a fixed num. Maybe that's not the method I was thinking of. Seems like there's a method called time ago in words. Maybe that's the one I'm thinking of. Time ago in words. Ah, that one seems to work. 5 days, 7 days. What was the actual to-dos for those, though? What if I make a new to-do, call it test 1, and I make it due tomorrow? Tells me about 24 hours for that one. What if I make another to-do, and I say its due date was yesterday? It tells me 1 day. Seems like we need a way of specifying whether it's passed or not. Excuse me. Didn't we write a method in our to-do class to determine if something was past due or not? Right? I did it more as an example of, an excuse for doing a unit test. But it might actually come in handy now. Here we've got one that's the method we wrote. It's called overdue. What if on our index page, when we do the time ago in words, what if we also add in there, if the to-do is overdue, Then we put in the word ago. So instead of it saying 1 day, it'll say 1 day ago. There we go. So then it's a lot more obvious. Test 1 is due in about 24 hours, whereas test 2 was 1 day ago. Finish to-dos example was 5 days ago, but Teach Rails class isn't due for 7 more days. Does that make sense? Any questions? Okay. We put a, didn't we put an attribute into our to-dos for urgency? Yeah. Every to-do can be marked as urgent or not. Maybe we could work on that next. How would we want to be able to mark a to-do as being urgent? We could do it maybe something like being able to mark it as complete with just a symbol that we could click, a little hyperlinked symbol of some sort. Maybe we could use an exclamation point. If we click the little exclamation point, that would mark it as being urgent. Sound like a plan? I'm going to need some way to be able to tell if something's actually been marked as urgent or not. How about I go to the actual row that that to-do is in, is I'll give it a class of urgent if to-do is urgent. So if urgent is true, basically, we'll put in the class of urgent on that row. Right now, I don't think anything's going to show up as being urgent, but just to make it more noticeable when it does, back over in my CSS again, in my table called, oh, I don't think I ever gave a class to this first table. My first table, I'm going to give it a class of pending, so that in the CSS I can say in the pending table, if there's a TR that has a class of urgent, then maybe we set the color to dark red. Right now nothing turns dark red, but that's appropriate because at the moment I don't think anything is showing up as being urgent. Just out of curiosity, if I go back over to my tests again, the test I was never able to get to work that shows whether we have marked something as being complete. What if I try it again but for urgent? Let me take the skip out of that one, retrieve a to-do, mark urgent as true, and then I want to check, I want to assert that urgent for that to-do has been set to true. Wonder if that one's going to fail the same way the one for complete did. run my tests. Yep, we have a failure. Same exact thing. Okay. So nothing particular having to do with the complete attribute. Same exact behavior for urgent. So we fix one of them, we can probably fix both. But if it's anything like complete, we could probably still go ahead and implement it. What if I add another row to my table? I'll show an exclamation point. Still going to to-do path, passing the to-do, but instead of complete true, I'm going to do urgent is true. Still a put request. There. Now I have an exclamation point showing up next to each one of them. If I click on one, it turned red because that one's now marked as being urgent.
Did you do method posting?
Yes. Or not post, put.
Okay.
Yeah. There it is. With the urgent part, it's a little bit different than the complete. What we did with complete was whenever we marked something as complete, it moved to an entirely different list. With urgent, we're just changing the way it's displayed. Would anybody ever need to mark something no longer as being urgent but still keep it on the list? Well, certainly possible. So maybe what we need to do is if it's not urgent, we need to let them mark it urgent. But if it is urgent, we need to let them undo that. Okay. I guess we could just keep the same exclamation point and just change the value that's submitted. So let's see. In my table cell here where I am handling that urgent link, how about I say if this to-do is urgent, then we'll do it one way. Otherwise, we'll do it the way we were just doing it. I'll take the same link that I already have. I'll paste it in as what to do if the link is or if the to-do is already urgent. But instead of submitting true, I'll submit, let's say, nil. Let's see, now if I go to one that's already urgent and I click the exclamation again, it stops being urgent, urgent, not urgent, so I can just toggle them back and forth. Okay. How are we doing on time? Yeah, so-so. I don't want to go into that bit. What else can we do? Any other little things that need to be done here? Other than just making it not look completely like an armpit. It's just ugly as can be, isn't it? But other than that, what other attributes did we initially give to our to-dos?
That's it. Just those four.
Urgent, due date, description, and complete. Alright. Alright, we'll tell you what. Let me just talk for a minute. We won't actually try and write anything else. And then we'll actually work on implementing some of this next time. Right? The direction I'm starting to think, as far as this thing's concerned now, is as far as urgency is concerned, wouldn't it be interesting if we could have the application automatically mark to-dos that are past due as being urgent? As soon as something goes past its due date, it becomes urgent automatically without us having to do anything special, right? How could we implement something like that?
Yeah.
Basically, potentially, we could just do something like an if statement on the page. Every time we display a to-do or access a to-do one way or another, we could say if it's overdue, urgent, true. Set urgent to true. Where would we actually put that code? Put it in the view, in the index template? No, probably not a good idea. We don't want to be updating data from there. Right? So put it in the controller, right? Put it in the index action. So every time somebody retrieves the index page, every time somebody requests the index page, we cycle through every to-do, potentially in the entire system, or at least that person's to-dos, and mark all of them that are urgent, that are overdue. Yeah, could be done. Right? What if there was another feature built into our application here where as soon as something became overdue and was marked as urgent, it sent the user an email about it? If we wanted to do that, we couldn't just put it into the index action, could we? Because the index action only runs when the person accesses the page. So if I set a to-do now that's due tomorrow, and I don't access the page again until next weekend, right? It wouldn't be until next weekend that the index action runs, sees that my to-do item is long overdue by that point, marks it as urgent, and sends me an email. Right? So essentially what I need is I need something that can be run separate from the web app itself. Right? Something separate from the templates and separate from the controllers. Something that I can basically sort of just run at will. Something that I could give to like an operating system scheduling program, and I could say, do this every minute. Every minute, go and run this Ruby code for me. Right? That's kind of what I need for a good solution to this mark these things as urgent as soon as they're overdue problem. Right? And Rails actually has a solution built into it. We've been using it all along. It's Rake. Right? Rake is a nice little bundled tool that comes with every Rails project that we can use to run little jobs. We can run them separately, independently from the web app itself. It doesn't matter if I have my web server running or not. Rake still works, right? We've been using Rake all along to migrate our database, to run our tests, to do all of those sorts of things, right? Rake does lots of stuff. If I do Rake -- tasks, I get my list of all the things Rake does, right? Lots of good stuff in there. And all those things I can run on my application at any time. It's not contingent on a template being rendered or on a controller action being executed. It's something that I could run potentially at any moment. You with me? I guess the only problem with Rake is there's no Rake job in there called mark to-dos that are overdue as urgent. Bummer. Right? The neat thing about Rake, though, is that it's very, very easy to be able to create your own Rake tasks. Right? So what we'll work on Thursday, right, is how to write Rake tasks. Right? Basically what we can do is we can add to this list for our application a Rake task called mark overdue to-dos as urgent, if we want to. I was also wondering about how do we get rid of to-dos? Right? How do we delete them? Well, instead of actually letting the user delete them, what if we set up something where if a to-do is marked as complete and let's say is been that way for 24 hours, then it gets deleted automatically. Right? Maybe something along those lines. We could do that with a Rake task. Right? So if we can write Rake tasks to do those things for us, what we could do is when we deploy our website on the server that we deploy to, it's almost certainly going to be Unix, Linux based. Right? Unix and Linux systems virtually always have this nice thing built into them called cron, C-R-O-N, which is a job scheduler. So on our production server or something related to it, something accessible to it, we could set up a little cron job, say, to run every minute where every minute it would go through our whole database of to-dos and mark those that are overdue as being urgent, right? Maybe that involves sending emails out to users, right? So it doesn't matter if they're logged into the system and accessing the page or not. That stuff would just automatically happen once a minute when it was necessary. We could also have it automatically go back and clear out to-dos that are marked as complete. Right? We could run that one, say, every 24 hours. So every 24 hours it goes and pairs back our database to get rid of all the complete jobs, all the complete to-dos. All we got to do is write a couple rake tasks for it. It's quick and easy. Right? So rake's a neat little tool. So that's what we'll work on. Okay? Any last questions? All right. I'll see you the day after tomorrow.